Hey everyone! Tonight we're heading into the forest for an adventure with three clever little pigs, a very determined wolf, and a whole lot of trouble. It's the classic fairy tale of the three little pigs told like you've never heard it before. This story is perfect for falling asleep to. It's detailed, cozy, and just a little bit mischievous. But before we get going, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss one of my videos. Also, leave a comment down below and let me know where you're listening from. Now, grab a blanket, get comfy, and let's see what happens when pigs outsmart wolves and the forest comes alive. Once upon a time, in a quiet valley at the edge of an ancient forest, there stood a cozy little cottage with a chimney that leaned slightly to one side and roses that climbed up its walls. The morning light poured gently across its thatched roof, and smoke drifted lazily into the pale blue sky. Inside that humble home lived an old sow and her three lively sons, three little pigs with bright eyes, curly tails, and hearts full of dreams. Their mother loved them dearly, but as time went on, food grew scarce, and the cottage began to feel smaller each season. The pigs had grown too big for the old wooden chairs, too restless for the same small field, and too curious about the world beyond the hills. So one bright morning, after a breakfast of warm porridge and apples from the orchard, their mother gathered them close by the hearth. "My dear sons," she said, her voice both kind and firm, "you've grown strong and clever, and the time has come for you to seek your fortunes. The world beyond the forest is wide and full of wonders, but remember, whatever you build it well. For there are wolves in the world who will test your work, and only the wise and patient will endure." The pigs listened quietly, though each took her words a little differently. The eldest, a thoughtful fellow named Brindle, nodded with solemn understanding. He had always been the practical one, steady and slow to act. The middle pig, Barley, was cheerful and easygoing, quick to laugh and quicker still to dream. The youngest, Pip, was spirited, clever, and a touch mischievous, never one to settle for the ordinary. When the morning came for them to leave, the old sow packed them each a small bundle, a loaf of bread, a wedge of cheese, and a few shiny apples. She kissed their foreheads one by one, her eyes glistening in the sunlight. "Be good to one another," she said, "and remember, hard work builds more than a house, it builds a life." And so the three little pigs set off down the dirt road that wound through the forest. Birds called overhead, and the scent of pine and wildflowers filled the air. The forest whispered around them, alive with the sounds of buzzing insects and the rustle of wind through the leaves. For a time, the brothers walked together, laughing, and talking about what kind of homes they would build. Brindle spoke of a sturdy cottage of stone, one that could last 100 years. Barley shrugged and said he'd rather have something easy, a cozy hut of straw, light and warm. Pip said nothing for a while. His eyes darted through the trees, watching the play of sunlight and shadow. "I think," Pip said finally, "I'll wait and see what the world has to offer before I decide. There's no sense in rushing." Barley chuckled. "You always say that, Pip, but if you wait too long, you'll be sleeping under the stars." "Maybe that wouldn't be so bad," Pip said with a grin. The road forked soon after, one path leading to a sunny meadow, another deeper into the woods, and a third that wound toward distant hills. The brothers hugged one another, promising to visit when their homes were built. Brindle took the path toward the hills where the land was rocky and firm. Barley wandered to the meadow where tall grass swayed in the wind. Pip watched them go, then turned toward the heart of the forest, following a winding stream that shimmered like silver in the morning light. He walked for hours, passing mossy stones and old tree roots that twisted like ancient bones. He stopped once to drink from the stream and watched a dragonfly skim across the surface. The air grew cooler as he ventured deeper into the trees, and the forest began to hum with quiet life. The distant tap of a woodpecker, the chirp of crickets, the sigh of the wind. At last he came to a clearing, where sunlight poured down through a canopy of leaves, and the ground was carpeted in soft moss. "Perhaps," he said aloud, "this will do." But something in his heart told him to keep going. Meanwhile, far behind him, Barley had already begun to build. He'd found a farmer stacking bales of golden straw and asked politely if he might buy some. The farmer, amused by the idea of a pig building a house, agreed and even threw in a bundle for free. Barley worked quickly. He tied bundles of straw together, humming as he went, the scent of hay filling the air. In a single afternoon, he had built himself a snug little hut with a roof that glowed in the sunlight. He stepped back, proud of his work, and called out to the passing wind, "Who needs stone and sweat when you've got sunshine and straw?" That night, Barley cooked himself a simple supper, sat by a small fire, and listened to the crickets. His house rustled softly when the breeze came through, but he smiled content. Brindle, by contrast, had only just begun. The hill he chose was steep, and the ground was hard, but he was determined. He spent hours gathering stones from a nearby stream, stacking them carefully, testing each one before setting it in place. His hands, small though they were, worked with purpose. He built slowly, but with care, each wall rising straight and true. By the time the stars came out, Brindle's muscles ached, but his heart was full. He lay down under the open sky, looking up at the constellations above the hills. "It will be strong," he whispered to himself. "It will last." And, in the forest's heart, Pip wandered still. He passed through glades lit by fireflies, across fallen logs and along paths where the scent of honeysuckle hung in the air. He wasn't thinking of work or walls. He was thinking of what it meant to live free, of what adventure might come next. But from somewhere deep among the trees, far beyond the reach of moonlight, a pair of yellow eyes watched the little pig wander by. They glimmered once, then vanished into the dark. The sun rose bright and golden over the meadow where Barley, the middle pig, had built his cheerful house of straw. The tall grass rippled in the wind like a sea of gold, and morning dew glistened on every blade. Barley stepped outside, stretching, and smiling as the warmth touched his snout. His straw house glowed softly in the light, the roof dipping slightly to one side, but that only made it seem more homey. It wasn't perfect. A few gaps let the breeze through, and one corner leaned, a little where the ground had settled overnight. But to Barley it was perfect enough. He had worked hard the day before, or so he believed, and now he wanted only to rest and enjoy the fruits of his labor. He tied a small red cloth around his neck like a scarf, filled a wooden bowl with cool water from the nearby brook, and began to hum a tune he'd learned long ago. His thoughts drifted lazily like clouds across the sky. "A fine home," he said to himself. "Warm in the day, cool at night. What more could a pig ask for?" Barley was a gentle soul who loved comfort, above all. While his older brother Brindle likely spent the morning hammering stones and setting beams, Barley preferred a slower pace. He built a small stool from twigs, laid a mat of hay outside his door, and napped under the shade of a lone oak tree. The world around him was alive with summer sounds, the buzzing of bees, the soft rush of the meadow wind, and the distant call of a lark. Butterflies danced lazily in the air. Everything was peaceful. For a while it seemed that the world itself smiled upon the little pig and his sunny straw home. By midday, Barley had visitors. A pair of field mice scurried by, stopping to admire his golden house. "It's quite the sight," said one mouse. "It looks like it was made by sunshine itself," said the other. Barley grinned. "Why, thank you. Built it all myself, you know. Only took me a day." The mice exchanged a glance, impressed, but also a little doubtful. "Quick work," said the first mouse. "But do you think it'll hold if a storm comes?" Barley waved a hoof dismissively. "Oh, I don't worry about storms. The sky's been kind to me. Besides, it's only straws. If it falls, I'll build it again. Easy as that." The mice twitched their whiskers, said polite goodbyes, and hurried back into the grass. Barley returned to his shade, laughing to himself. "Worry, worry, worry. That's Brindle's way, not mine." But as the afternoon waned and the shadows grew longer, the wind shifted. It came softly at first, just a gentle sigh rolling across the meadow. But soon it carried a different sound, a faint crackle of branches, a rustle that wasn't the wind. Something was moving among the tall grass, slow and deliberate. Barley lifted his head. "Hello?" he called out, sitting up. "Who's there?" No answer came, only the whisper of the grass as it swayed. He shrugged it off, probably the wind again or a wandering deer. Yet as the silence settled once more, He felt a prickling at the back of his neck, that strange, uneasy feeling of being watched. Moments later, a low voice drifted through the air, smooth and deep. "What a fine little house," it said, from somewhere beyond the tall grass. "So bright, so golden, so inviting." Barley stood quickly, his ears perked. "Who's out there?" Out from the meadow stepped a figure tall and lean, cloaked in shadows though the sun still hung above the horizon. His fur was a dark grey that shimmered faintly silver in the light, and his eyes, oh his eyes, were yellow as autumn leaves. His smile was too wide, too full of teeth. "Good afternoon," said the wolf, bowing low. "I was just passing through your lovely meadow and couldn't help but notice this remarkable home. Might I say it's quite deliciously charming," Barley swallowed. "Delightfully charming," he corrected nervously. "And thank you. I built it myself." "Of course you did," said the wolf, circling slowly around the house, his paws silent in the grass. "Straw, is it? Very clever. So light, so easy to put together. Efficient, one might say." "Yes, well, it keeps the rain out." "I'm sure it does," said the wolf. His eyes glinted. "Tell me, my dear pig, might I come in just for a chat, perhaps a cup of tea? I've had a long walk and I do so enjoy the company of enterprising creatures." Barley's hooves shifted uneasily. I'm sorry," he said, trying to sound polite, "but I don't let strangers inside my house." "Ah," said the wolf, his smile sharpening. "A shame. I was so hoping to see how well built it is. I've always admired fine craftsmanship." Barley took a step back. "Good day, sir." The wolf tilted his head, then sighed dramatically. "Well, if you insist. But you see, my curiosity is terribly strong, and when curiosity takes hold..." He leaned close to the door, his breath warm and heavy. "I'm afraid I simply must have a closer look." Then, with a grin that stretched ear to ear, the wolf drew a deep breath and said, little pig, let me come in." Barley's heart thudded. "Not by the hair on my chinny chin," he cried, clutching the straw door shut. "Then I'll huff," growled the wolf, drawing in another breath. "And I'll puff." Barley braced himself. "And I'll blow your house in." The wolf exhaled with a force like a storm. The golden straw quivered, trembled, and then tore free. Walls burst apart. The roof lifted into the air, and the little straw house came tumbling down in a whirl of dust and hay. Barley squealed and bolted, racing across the meadow as the wolf laughed behind him. The wind carried his laughter far and wide, low and cruel and hungry. Barley didn't stop until he saw the rocky hill where Brindle's sturdy house was taking shape. He stumbled up the path, panting, straw still clinging to his fur. Brother, let me in," he cried. Brindle looked up from his work, hammer still in hoof, and his eyes widened. "Barley, what happened?" "The wolf," gasped Barley. "He's in the meadow. He blew my house to pieces." Brindle dropped his hammer, helping his brother inside. "Then you'll stay here," he said firmly. "My house is strong. He won't get through these walls." Down below, on the edge of the meadow, the wolf stood among the scattered straw. He brushed a bit from his shoulder and smiled. "Two more," he said softly, his eyes turning toward the hills. The hills were quiet after the wolf's laughter faded into the distance. Evening light draped the land in soft gold, and the wind that had once raced through the meadow now brushed gently across the rocky slopes. On one of those slopes, a small stone cottage was slowly taking shape. Strong, square, and built by steady hooves. Brindle worked late into the twilight. He had laid each stone by hand, fitted each one with care, and packed the cracks with mud and clay until the walls stood firm. The scent of earth filled the air, and a trickle of sweat ran down his snout, but he smiled with satisfaction. His brother Barley, shaken but alive, sat nearby on a wooden stump. The remains of straw still clung to his fur, and every gust of wind made him flinch. He watched Brindle work in silence for a while before finally speaking. "I thought my house would be enough," Barley said quietly. "It looked so warm and bright. But he came out of nowhere, Brindle. He was clever and cruel, and his breath... Goodness, I've never felt wind like that." Brindle paused, resting his hooves on the handle of his hammer. "That's the way of wolves," he said. "They test the world for weakness. That's why we build things strong." Barley nodded slowly, gazing at the half-built cottage. "You were right. Mother was right too. I should have listened." Brindle gave a small smile. You learned, that's what matters. Now we'll finish this one together, and you'll be safe here." And so they worked through the evening side by side. Brindle stacked stones while Barley gathered sticks for the roof beams and doorframe. They laughed once or twice, nervously at first, then more freely as the stars began to bloom overhead. The house would be small but strong, a fortress against the chill and the dark. Yet far from the rocky hill and the ruined meadow, deep within the forest's tangled heart, the youngest brother, Pip, still wandered. The trees grew older and taller. The farther he went, their roots knotted like sleeping dragons. Moonlight filtered through the branches in silvery stripes, and owls called softly from above. Pip was not afraid. He had the curious courage of youth, the sort that comes not from strength, but from wonder. He had spent the day following a winding stream, and now, as night settled, he found himself before a bridge of fallen logs stretching across a quiet glen. Fireflies flickered in the shadows, and somewhere nearby, a brook laughed over stones. Ayachoyua crossed slowly, humming to himself. "Straw is soft," he murmured. "Stone is strong, but maybe there's something between them. Something just right." The next morning, Pip woke to sunlight spilling through the leaves. He yawned, stretched, and followed a path that led him out of the deep woods into a clearing of poplar trees. There, beside a bend in the stream, lay a pile of sturdy branches, smooth, straight and dry from the sun. It seemed almost as if the forest had left them there for him. "Well," Pip said with a grin, "that's an invitation if I've ever seen one." He got to work right away. Pip had a knack for building, not the patient, measured way of Brindle, but quick and clever, full of little tricks. He lashed the branches together with vines, weaving them tight until they formed strong walls. He layered bark over the roof to keep out the rain and left a round window so the light could pour in. By afternoon, his house stood tall among the poplars, rough but handsome, a patchwork of browns and greens that blended perfectly with the forest. Birds soon returned to the branches overhead, chirping approvingly as Pip dusted off his hooves. "There," he said proudly. "Not too heavy, not too flimsy. Just right." He gathered berries for supper and sat on a stump outside his door. Watching the golden light fade through the trees, the forest felt alive around him, peaceful like an old friend keeping him company. Somewhere in the distance, the brook still murmured its endless song. For a while all was calm, but wolves are creatures of patience, and the one who had blown down the straw house was already on the move again. His hunger had not been satisfied. He had tasted the thrill of the chase, and the thought of 2 more pigs made his mouth water. He followed the scent of straw and fear up the hillside, where he soon found Brindle's small stone cottage. The wolf crouched behind a boulder, his eyes narrowing. The cottage looked stronger than the first house, but the roof was not yet finished. Smoke curled from a makeshift chimney, and through the window he could see 2 pigs moving about inside. He grinned. "2 for the price of 1, he whispered. He waited until the sun began to dip, and then he approached with long, slow strides, his claws crunching softly in the gravel. Inside, Barley froze mid-sentence. "Do you hear that?" Brindle looked up. "Stay behind me," he said. A shadow fell across the doorway. Then came the voice, smooth, mocking, familiar. Little pigs, let me come in." Brindle's jaw tightened. "Not by the hair on our chinny chin-chins," he called out. The wolf's grin spread wide. "Then I'll huff." He drew in a deep breath, the air whistling between his teeth. "And I'll puff." The walls trembled slightly, dust falling from the rafters. Barley grabbed Brindle's shoulder, trembling. "And I'll blow." "Your house in." The wolf exhaled with fury. The wind roared around the cottage, whipping dust and loose stones into the air. But when the dust settled, the house stood firm. The wolf blinked in surprise, then snarled and tried again. He huffed until his lungs ached, puffed until his breath came ragged, but the stones would not move. The house held fast. Inside, Brindle let out a low laugh. "You see, brother? Hard work always." The wolf slammed his paw against the wall, cutting him off. "You may be safe for now," he growled, his voice low and furious. "But your cleverness won't last forever. Pigs talk, and when one pig knows fear, the others soon follow. I'll find the third, and when I do..." He licked his lips. "I'll be back." He turned and vanished into the trees, his shadow stretching long behind him. The brothers stood together in silence. Barley trembled, but Brindle placed a hoof on his shoulder. "We'll be ready next time," he said, and deep within the poplar grove, where the sunlight flickered gently through the leaves, Pip lifted his head from his work. He thought just for a moment that he heard laughter carried faintly on the wind. Not the laughter of joy, but of something hungry and cold. He frowned, setting down his branch. "Must have been the breeze," he muttered, but far away, through the twisting paths of the forest, the wolf was already following the scent of fresh-cut wood. The forest slept beneath a silver moon, and the wind whispered softly through the leaves. Pip's little house of sticks stood nestled among the poplars, its bark roof gleaming faintly in the starlight. Inside, Pip snored lightly beneath a patchwork quilt of moss and dried leaves. The day had been long, and he had worked hard, harder than he'd admit to anyone, so his sleep was deep and untroubled. But out beyond the clearing, beneath the tangle of ferns and shadow, something stirred. The wolf had come. He moved silently. Through the underbrush, his paws light as falling petals, his yellow eyes catching the moonlight between the trees. He had followed Pip's trail for most of the night, guided by the faint scent of wood smoke and the subtle tang of fresh-cut timber. Every step brought him closer. Every breath carried the scent of his next meal. He paused at the edge of the clearing, hidden behind a fallen log, and studied the small house. The wolf tilted his head. "Sticks," he murmured to himself. "Stronger than straw, weaker than stone. Clever little pig. Clever, but not clever enough." He sat back on his haunches, waiting. The forest hummed softly around him. The hoot of an owl, the chirp of crickets, the sigh of the night breeze. He could wait until dawn. Wolves were good at waiting. But inside the stick house, Pip stirred. Some instinct deep within him, some whisper of danger pulled him from his dreams. He blinked sleepily and sat up, listening. The fire in his hearth had burned low, but the air felt different now, thicker somehow. The silence outside was too complete. He rose from his bed, moving softly so the floorboards wouldn't creak, and peered out through the round window. At first he saw nothing but the shifting silver shadows of leaves. But then, just for an instant, he caught the glimmer of two golden eyes in the dark. Pip froze. Those eyes did not blink. He stepped back slowly from the window, his heart pounding. Then he whispered to himself, "So, he's found me too." For a moment he considered running. The path to Brindle's stone house was long but clear enough if he started before dawn. Yet another part of him, the part that bristled at fear, made him hesitate. "No," he muttered, "not yet. Let's see what this wolf is made of." He reached for a sturdy branch he'd kept by the door, more for decoration than defense. But now it felt heavy and reassuring in his hooves. Then he took a deep breath and waited. Outside, the wolf crept closer, his claws barely touching the earth. The smell of smoke and wood filled his nostrils now. The house loomed before him, crooked but charming in its own way. He could almost hear the faint rhythm of Pip's heartbeat inside. The wolf smiled. He loved this part, the anticipation, the quiet before the game began. He stepped into the clearing, clearing his throat in a polite cough. "Good evening, little pig," he called out in his smooth, silken voice. "What a charming home you have here. So rustic, so natural. I do admire a creature with taste." Pip didn't answer. He stood still behind the door, his hoof on the latch. "Won't you let me in?" said the wolf, circling slowly. "It's dreadfully cold out here, and I've been walking all night. I'd be ever so grateful for a seat by your fire." Still, Pip said nothing. The wolf smiled thinly. "Ah, you've heard the stories then. My reputation precedes me. I can't say I'm not flattered." He stopped before the door and placed a paw gently against it. The wood creaked beneath his claws. "Very well," he said softly. "If you won't let me in by invitation." He drew in a deep breath, his chest expanding like a bellows. "Then I'll simply make my own entrance." Pip braced himself. Little pig, let me come in. Not by the hair on my chinny chin," Pip shouted back. The wolf's grin turned wicked. "Then I'll huff." He inhaled, deeply, the wind stirring around him. "And I'll puff." The trees bent with the force of his breath. "And I'll blow your house in." He exhaled with a roar and the clearing erupted into chaos. Leaves tore from branches, dust filled the air, and the walls of Pip's stick house shuddered violently. But this time, the house did not fall right away. The branches creaked and groaned. The bark roof trembled, but it held. The wolf's eyes narrowed. "Oh, you're a stubborn one," he huffed again, harder this time, his breath tearing through the clearing like a gale. Pip stumbled as the roof beams began to split. One more blast, and the walls gave way, splinters flying like arrows. Pip dove through the back door just as the front collapsed, the wind roaring behind him. The wolf lunged forward with a snarl, but Pip was already sprinting through the trees, the moonlight flashing on his back. "Run, little pig," the wolf called. After him. "Run while you can!" Pip dashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at his face, heart pounding like thunder. Behind him, he heard the wolf's heavy steps, the sound of claws digging into soil. He veered left, following the stream that wound through the forest. His lungs burned, but he didn't stop. At last, through the trees, he saw it, a light glowing faintly on the hillside, his brother's house. "Almost there," he gasped. He burst from the forest into the rocky clearing, shouting, "Brindle! Barley, open up!" Inside, Brindle was already at the door. He flung it open and Pip stumbled inside, collapsing onto the stone floor. "He's here," Pip panted. "He found me. He blew it down." Barley, pale and trembling, looked toward the window. "He said he'd be back," he whispered. Brindle barred the door and turned to them both. His face was calm, but his eyes were fierce. "Then let him come. This time we're ready." Outside, down the path and among the whispering trees, the wolf approached the hill. His breath was steady, his stride confident. He had failed twice, but this was the challenge he relished most. He paused, staring up at the stone house, its windows glowing faintly in the dark. "3 little pigs," he murmured. 3 little meals." The moon rose higher, and the wolf smiled. "Let's see whose house truly stands." The night was dark and restless over the forested hills. Clouds moved across the moon like drifting smoke, and the wind carried faint echoes of the wolf's laughter. But on the steepest rise of that hill, a small cottage of stone stood firm against the cold, its chimney puffing steady curls of grey. Inside, the 3 pigs gathered close around the hearth. Brindle sat beside the fire, sharpening a small wooden tool, his expression steady and thoughtful. Barley huddled beneath a blanket, his eyes darting now and then toward the window. Pip sat on the floor with his back to the wall, catching his breath, his heart still pounding from the chase. For a while no one spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. At last, Brindle said, "He'll come." Barley groaned softly. "Can't we just leave? Go somewhere far away, somewhere wolves don't bother pigs?" Brindle shook his head. He'd follow. Wolves always follow. The only way to end it is to face him. Pip glanced up. "And I think this house will hold." Brindle smiled faintly. "I don't think it will." He set down the tool and ran a hoof along the nearest wall. "Every stone fits tight, every joint sealed. He can huff and puff all he wants, but this house was built to endure." The confidence in his voice settled the room like a warm blanket. Barley exhaled slowly, his shoulders easing. Pip leaned forward, watching the firelight play over the rough stone walls. "You did good work, Brindle," he said quietly. "Mother would be proud." Brindle's eyes softened. "She'd tell us all to stop quarreling and share our supper." That made Barley chuckle. She would, wouldn't she? For a moment, laughter returned to the house. The fire burned brighter, the fear fading just a little. But outside, down among the trees, the wolf was climbing the hill. His breath came in slow, deep pulls, the air whistling through his sharp teeth. His fur was damp with dew, and his eyes gleamed with hunger and cunning. He had failed twice tonight, and that stung his pride. But wolves were nothing if not persistent. And this one, this clever, silver-furred creature, was determined that the night would end in his favor. When he reached the base of the hill, he stopped to rest beneath a gnarled pine, gazing up at the faint glow of firelight spilling through the small stone windows. "So," he murmured to himself, "this is the fortress. Let's see if it's as unbreakable as they say." He climbed quietly, his paws crunching on loose pebbles, until he stood at the doorstep. The cottage loomed close and solid, its stones cool and immovable beneath his claws. He ran a paw along the wall, testing its strength, then smiled. "Ah, the sensible one built this, didn't he? The eldest always thinks he's the cleverest." He rapped gently on the door. Little pigs, he said in his honeyed tone. "Won't you let me come in?" Inside, Brindle looked up from the hearth. "Here he is," he said, softly. Barley clutched the blanket tighter. Pip stood, moving to the window. "Not by the hair on our chin-chins," he shouted. The wolf's smile turned sharp. "Then I'll huff," he said, drawing in a deep breath. "And I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." He exhaled with all his might, his breath roaring across the stones like a storm wind. Dust swirled around the door. The fire flickered, but the walls did not move. Not even a pebble shifted. The wolf blinked in surprise, then snarled and tried. Again. He huffed until his chest burned, puffed until the trees bent behind him. But the house stood strong and silent. Inside, Pip grinned. "He's wasting his breath," Barley managed a nervous laugh. "Maybe he'll pass out." Brindle stayed still, watching the door. "No," he said. "He won't stop. He'll change tactics." And indeed, outside, the wolf straightened. Slowly, his breath coming ragged, his eyes burning with anger and thought. So, stone walls. Clever pigs. He looked up at the chimney, a thin column of smoke rising against the dark sky. "But every house," he whispered, "has a door." He began to climb. Quiet as mist, the wolf scrambled up the side of the cottage, his claws finding purchase between the stones. Inside, the pigs heard nothing but the crackle of the fire and the low whistle of the wind. The wolf reached the roof, crouching low beside the chimney. Heat rose up from it, carrying the scent of wood smoke and the faintest aroma of apples cooking below. His stomach growled. "Down I go," he murmured. But Brindle was no fool. He had built his house not only with strength but with foresight. He had learned the forest's lessons, the way wind finds the smallest cracks, the way fire needs breath to live, and the way danger always looks for the easiest path. He saw a flicker of shadow pass across the firelight and felt the change in air pressure above. He turned instantly. "He's on the roof," Barley squeaked. "What? How?" "Quick!" Brindle barked. He tossed aside his stool and grabbed the heavy iron pot that hung above the fire. The apples inside hissed and bubbled. With a swift motion, he pulled it off the hook and slid it to the center of the hearth. "Keep the fire hot!" Pip grinned, understanding at once. He tossed on another log, the flames leaping high and bright. The air grew warm and thick with the scent of caramelizing fruit. Above, the wolf lowered himself into the chimney, claws scraping the brick. "Down, down, down," he muttered. "Dinner awaits." The smoke curled around him, stinging his eyes, but hunger drove him on. He was halfway down when the first curl of heat reached his paws. "Hmm?" he said, pausing. Then the smoke thickened, hot and biting. He coughed, blinking tears from his eyes. What's this?" The heat rose sharply, licking up the chimney like a fiery tongue. "Ah!" cried the wolf, scrambling to back up, but his paws slipped on the soot-slick stones. Inside, Pip and Barley stepped back from the hearth. Flames danced high, the pot of apples bubbling furiously. Brindle stood ready, poker in hoof. Then, with a great yelp and a flash of grey, the wolf shot out of the chimney like a cork from a bottle, smoke trailing behind him. He landed in the dirt outside with a thud and a howl. His tail singed, his pride even more so. He rolled in the dust, sputtering and growling, before finally leaping to his feet. "You haven't seen the last of me," he barked hoarsely. "I'll find you again, pigs. Mark my words." And with that he turned and vanished into the dark forest, limping slightly as he went. For a long moment the pigs said nothing. Then Barley burst out laughing, first softly, then louder, until even Brindle cracked a smile. Pip joined in, his laughter echoing through the small stone house until it filled the night. When at last the laughter faded, Brindle set his poker aside and said, "It's over. For now." Pip nodded. "For now," he agreed. But his eyes drifted toward the window, where the last trace of smoke rose into the night. "He'll think twice before crossing pigs again." The three brothers sat together by the fire, finishing, the apples that hadn't boiled away, the stars twinkling quietly beyond the chimney. Outside, the wind had gone still, and the forest slept in peace. But deep in the dark woods, where the moonlight barely touched the ground, a pair of yellow eyes blinked once, then disappeared. Morning came gently to the hilltop. The forest that had trembled through the night now lay bathed in soft gold, as if the sunlight itself were a balm for the earth's weary heart. Dew glittered on the leaves. Smoke from the chimney curled lazily into the sky, and the air smelled faintly of ash and apples. Inside the stone cottage, the three pigs stirred awake one by one. The fire had burned down to embers, glowing softly like buried rubies. Pip was the first to rise. He stretched his legs, yawned, and looked around. Brindle still sat in his chair by the hearth, head tilted forward, dozing lightly. Barley was curled in a blanket near the window, snoring softly. For a long time, Pip just stood there, listening to the quiet. The world felt strangely still, as if holding its breath after the chaos of the night before. He walked to the door and opened it. The cool morning air brushed across his face, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil. The yard was scattered with soot and paw prints, the ground torn up where the wolf had stumbled and fled. But the house itself stood unharmed, not a stone, out of place. Pip stepped outside, his hooves crunching in the gravel. He looked out over the valley below, where sunlight streamed through the trees like ribbons of gold. From here he could see the remains of his old straw house, a faint dark patch in the grass, nothing more. Beyond that, in the next clearing, a few splintered boards marked the spot where Barley's wooden home had fallen. He felt a twist in his chest, part sorrow, part relief. Those houses had been fragile, yes, but they'd been home, and they'd been lessons too. Behind him, the door creaked open. "Couldn't sleep either, eh?" said Brindle. Pip turned and smiled faintly. "Not really. Feels strange, doesn't it, knowing it's over?" Brindle stepped outside, pulling his cloak around his shoulders. For now, at least, wolves are stubborn creatures, but this one's pride took a wound last night. That may keep him away for a while. Pip nodded, gazing down the hill. "Still, I can't believe how close it came. If your house hadn't held—" Brindle put a hoof on his shoulder. "It held because you both made it here, because we stood together." Barley appeared in the doorway, hair tousled, blinking sleep from his eyes. "Is he gone?" he asked, his voice still thick with drowsiness. Brindle nodded. "Gone and smarting, I'd wager." Barley grinned. "Serves him right. That'll teach him to mess with a pig's chimney." They all laughed, a quiet, easy laughter that felt like the first deep breath after a storm. Brindle turned serious again. "Still, we can't stay frightened forever. The forest won't feel safe until we make it so. Today we rebuild, properly. This time, together." Barley raised a brow. "You mean 3 houses?" Brindle shook his head. "No, just one. Strong and large enough for all of us. We'll make it our home, not just a refuge." Pip's eyes brightened. "All of us under one roof again?" "Exactly," said Brindle. "We each have something to offer. Pip, you've got a knack for quick work and clever fixes. Barley, your carpentry's better than you think. And I—" He smiled modestly. "Well, I can keep the walls from falling down." Barley chuckled. "Sounds fair to me, though I'll miss my little garden." "So you'll have a bigger one," Brindle promised. "We'll build terraces down the slope, stone beds that won't wash away with the rain." Barley's grin widened. "Now that's an idea." So they set to work. All that day, the sound of hammers and laughter echoed over the hill. Brindle mixed mortar and laid stone with patient care, humming softly as he worked. Barley measured beams and carved pegs, his confidence growing with every strike of his mallet. Pip hauled timber from the edge of the woods, singing as he went, his energy tireless and infectious. By afternoon, a new rhythm filled the clearing, the rhythm of purpose, of healing. The forest, too, seemed to respond. Birds returned to their branches. Squirrels ventured out once more. Even the breeze felt warmer, less sharp. When the sun began to sink, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the new house had begun to take shape. It wasn't grand, but it was strong. A blend of stone and timber with wide windows to let in the light. The pigs stood back, admiring their work, their faces glowing with sweat and pride. Barley wiped his brow. "It's beautiful already," he said softly. Brindle smiled. "It's the start of something better. Not just safe, but ours." That evening, as dusk settled over the forest, they sat together by a small fire outside the half-built home. Pip had roasted a few apples in the embers. Barley had found wild herbs for tea. Fireflies blinked among the trees, and the forest hummed gently with life. For the first time in a long while, none of them felt afraid. Pip leaned back against a log, gazing up at the stars. "You know," he said, "I used to think living alone was the dream. No one to nag me, no one to tell me I'm lazy or reckless." Brindle chuckled. "And now," Pip smiled, "now I think being alone's overrated." Barley raised his mug. "To brothers, then." "To brothers," they echoed, clinking their cups together. For a while they sat in companionable silence, watching the flames dance and fade. The moon rose high, silvering the edges of the trees. Somewhere far away, a wolf howled, but the sound was faint, almost wistful, carried off by the wind before it could reach their ears. Brindle stirred the fire one last time and said, "Let him wander. We've built something he can't tear down. Not with huffing, not with puffing, not with anything." Pip grinned. "And if he tries again," Barley laughed, "he'll get a face full of apples." The three pigs laughed together, the sound ringing warm and steady through the night. And on that peaceful hill, beneath the watchful stars, their new life began, not one of fear, but of strength, courage, and kinship. In the depths of the forest, far beyond the reach of morning light, the wolf nursed his wounds beneath an ancient cedar. His tail, still singed from the chimney's fire, twitched with irritation as he licked the scorched fur. Smoke had blackened the tips of his ears. His paws were raw from clawing at stone. But the sting of his injuries was nothing compared to the burn of humiliation. He had never failed so completely. Not once. For years, the wolf had been the terror of the forest's edge, the shadow that mothers warned their children about, the whisper that turned the bravest beasts uneasy. But now his legend had been singed away like fur in a flame. He growled low, the sound echoing through the hollow trees. "Pigs!" he spat, the word like a curse. "Little foolish pigs!" His reflection shimmered faintly in a puddle. At his paws, a wild creature, lean and sharp but no longer proud. "You outwitted me once," he snarled softly. "But the forest doesn't favor fools for long." Above him a crow cawed and fluttered down to a nearby branch. "Outwitted, were you?" the crow croaked, tilting its head. "By pigs, of all things?" The wolf's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tongue, feathered pest." The crow chuckled, black feathers gleaming in a shaft of pale light. "I only say what the forest says. Word travels, you know. Every fox and finch is talking about it. The mighty wolf bested by 3 squealing brothers." The wolf lunged, jaws snapping. The crow hopped just out of reach, cackling, "Temper, temper!" The wolf's breath came hard and ragged. He sat back, forcing himself to calm. Rage wouldn't help. Rage was what had driven him to charge headlong at Stone. No, this time he would need more than brute strength. He looked up at the crow. "You seem to know much, little bird. Tell me, what do the pigs do now?" The crow blinked, then hopped closer, intrigued. "Ah, so you wish to know their building, wolf? Oh, they're quite busy. Hammering and stacking, laughing together. A fine new house, bigger than before." The wolf's ears pricked. "Bigger?" "Stronger too," said the crow. "Stone and timber both. A home fit for 3. Built on that. Hill of theirs, I've seen it myself." The wolf's lips curled into a thin smile. "Then they're making it easier for me." The crow tilted its head. "Easier? How so?" "One house," said the wolf, his voice low and deliberate, "means 1 meal. 3 pigs together, all in one place. I won't have to hunt them separately." The crow hopped nervously along the branch. "You failed with Stone before." "I failed," said the wolf, "because I underestimated them. I let anger blind me." He stood stretching his long body, his muscles rippling beneath his grey coat. "But this time will be different." He began to pace beneath the trees. "Brindle built that stone house with skill. I'll grant him that. But even the strongest walls have weak points. Every creature has habits, routines. They grow comfortable, careless. He glanced back at the crow. Watch them for me. Tell me what you see when they sleep, when they wake, where they gather their food. I'll reward you. The crow fluffed its feathers, uncertain. Reward? The wolf bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. Half a feast is better than none. The bird hesitated, then nodded. You'll have your news, wolf. With a flap of wings, it took off toward the hill. The wolf watched it go, then turned his gaze toward the faint light beyond the trees. Build your fortress, little pigs, he murmured. Stack your stones high and light your fires bright. The higher your walls, the deeper I'll dig. The brighter your flame, the darker. My shadow grows. He moved through the forest like smoke, silent and patient. The days passed and he stayed hidden, feeding on roots and small prey, his strength returning. The burns on his tail healed, leaving a streak of black that shimmered like ink. His eyes, once fierce with hunger, now gleamed with purpose. And while the pigs built, he watched. From the safety of the woods, he saw them hauling timber, laughing as they worked. He saw Brindle pause often to survey the walls, ensuring every stone was perfect. He saw Pip scampering up ladders, cheerful as ever, and Barley tending to the new garden they'd started near the path. They looked happy, content. That, the wolf thought, would make their fall all the sweeter. When night fell, he crept closer, padding across the moss. The scent of cooked apples drifted from the chimney, sweet and familiar. It stirred both hunger and memory in him, the sting of fire, the humiliation of retreat. He shuddered, but stayed low. The house was nearly finished now, its stone base rising strong and proud, the roof half laid with timber. Windows glowed softly from inside, warm squares of amber light in the darkness. The wolf crouched in the underbrush and whispered to himself, "Let them think they've won. Let them feel safe." He closed his eyes and listened, to the crackle of their fire, to their laughter, to the faint murmur of conversation. Pip's voice drifted out. "Do you think he's gone for good?" Barley replied, "I hope so." Brindle said nothing. Then, after a pause, he spoke quietly. "Wolves don't forget, neither should we." The wolf's lips parted in a thin grin. "Wise words, pig, but remembering me won't save you." He slipped back into the shadows before dawn, unseen. Days turned to weeks. The pig's house was finished at last, strong and splendid, with a great hearth, wide doors, and a garden that bloomed with herbs and flowers. They invited the forest creatures to a small feast to celebrate. Rabbits, deer, badgers, all came, curious and cheerful, and high above, in the boughs of an old oak, the crow watched, memorizing every detail. When night returned and the guests had gone, the crow flew through the forest, gliding down to where the wolf waited. "They're settled," the bird croaked. "They sleep soundly after their feast. Every night the fire burns down by midnight, and the doors left unlatched for air." The wolf's eyes gleamed like coals. "Unlatched," he repeated softly. The crow nodded. "They trust the stone walls too much." "Good," said the wolf. "You've earned your share." He tossed a scrap of rabbit meat at the bird's claws. "Now go. The forest's about to remember why it feared me." The crow flapped away, eager and nervous. The wolf turned his gaze toward the hill, faintly visible in the moonlight. His grin stretched wide, cruel and silent. "Not by huffing and puffing this time," he said to the wind. "No, this time I'll walk right through the door." The moon rose late that night, pale and watchful, half hidden behind a gauze of drifting clouds. The forest lay quiet beneath it, too quiet, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. On the hill, the pig's new house glowed softly in the darkness. The last embers of the evening fire flickered through the windows. Crickets chirped in the grass. An owl hooted somewhere far away. Inside, all three brothers slept soundly. Barley was sprawled on a wide wooden bed near the hearth, snoring faintly, one hoof dangling off the edge. Pip slept curled under a quilt by the window, a faint smile still on his face from the evening's laughter. And Brindle, as always, had taken the chair by the door, not because he didn't trust the walls, but because habit made him cautious. His head rested against the back of the chair, eyes closed. Though sleep came lightly and slow, the night deepened. The wind whispered through the trees, And then, somewhere beyond the garden, a twig snapped. Brindle's ear twitched. He didn't stir at first, telling himself it was nothing, a fox perhaps or a deer come to nibble at the herbs. But then came another sound, the faint crunch of gravel beneath a careful step. His eyes opened. For a moment, he sat perfectly still, listening. The sound stopped. The forest went silent again. He rose quietly from the chair and crossed to the window. The glass was cool beneath his hoof as he peered out into the night. The garden lay peaceful, the gate slightly ajar where Barley had forgotten to latch it. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Nothing moved. Still, Brindle's heart began to beat faster. Something was wrong. He glanced toward the hearth. The fire had burned low, but a few glowing coals still pulsed faintly beneath the ash. He took the poker and stirred them, coaxing a little more light into the room. The flicker illuminated Pip's sleeping face, then Barley's, then the stone walls beyond. All seemed safe, and yet he could feel it. Outside, hidden among the trees, the wolf waited. He had moved silently through the undergrowth, every step measured and precise. His fur blended with the shadows, his breath shallow and slow. He could see the glow of the pig's fire through the window, could smell the faint sweetness of cooked apples lingering in the air. He crept closer, each movement deliberate. His eyes gleamed faintly as he reached the edge of the garden. The door, just as the crow had said, was unlatched. The wolf's grin returned, wide and silent. He pushed gently, and the wood gave with a faint creak. He froze, listening. No movement. Inside. He eased the door open further, slow enough that even the hinges barely dared to whisper. The cool night air slipped in behind him as he crossed the threshold. The wolf's paws made no sound on the stone floor. He took in the room, the hearth, the beds, the soft rise and fall of sleeping breaths. His gaze settled on Pip first, curled by the window, and his mouth watered. Then he looked to Barley, heavy with dreams, and Brindle by the door. 3 pigs, he whispered to himself. 3 courses. He moved closer. But as he did, the coals in the hearth flared unexpectedly, a brief bright flicker that caught in his eyes. Brindle, half awake already, stirred at the sudden light. His eyes opened and met the wolf's. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Brindle spoke, his voice calm but sharp as a knife. "I thought you'd learned your lesson." The wolf's grin vanished. Before he could spring, Brindle swung the iron poker, striking the floor with a ringing clang. Sparks leapt into the air, and Pip shot upright with a startled shout. Barley rolled off his bed, tangled in his blanket, blinking in confusion. "Wolf!" Brindle barked. "To the hearth! Now!" The wolf lunged, teeth bared, but Barley grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy wooden stool, and hurled it with all his might. It struck the wolf in the shoulder, staggering him sideways. Pip darted behind Brindle, grabbing the iron tongs from the wall. The wolf snarled, regaining his balance. "You can't stop me, pigs, not this time." Brindle raised the poker again, the firelight glinting off its tip. "We don't have to stop you," he said evenly. "We just have to hold you long enough." The wolf's eyes narrowed. "For what?" "For this," said Pip, and in one swift motion, he pulled the latch rope that hung above the hearth. A heavy iron grate dropped down with a clang, sealing the chimney. The wolf froze, realizing too late that his escape route was gone. Barley was already at the back door, slamming it shut and bolting it fast. The wolf spun, teeth flashing, but the pigs closed in together, a tight circle, backs to the fire, faces lit with resolve. "Get out of my way." The wolf roared. Brindle stood tall. "Not this time." For a long moment the wolf hesitated. The flames painted his face in gold and crimson, his shadow stretching across the floor like a dark storm cloud. The pigs did not move. Finally, the wolf laughed, and low and bitter. "So be it," he growled. "You've earned yourselves another night. But you can't hide forever. The forest belongs to the hunter, not the hunted." He turned, leapt through the open window with a crash of glass, and vanished into the trees. Silence filled the room once more, broken only by the pigs' ragged breathing. Barley sank onto the floor, heart pounding. "I thought—" he began but couldn't finish. Brindle lowered the poker, his expression unreadable. "He's not finished. He'll try again. But now we know how far he'll go." Pip nodded, eyes wide. We'll be ready next time. Brindle gave a small nod, but his gaze lingered on the shattered window. Beyond it, the forest swayed under the pale moonlight. Silent, secretive, waiting. Somewhere out there, the wolf was still moving, wounded but alive, his plans shifting like shadows on water. The pigs cleaned the room, boarded the window, and fed the fire until it burned bright once more. None of them slept again that night, and outside, deep among the whispering trees, a pair of yellow eyes watched the hill, patient, calculating, and colder than the moon. The morning after the wolf's failed chimney attempt dawned crisp and clear. Sunlight spilled across the hill, brushing the stone walls of the pig's house in a warm glow. The forest seemed to hold its breath, quiet but alive with rustling leaves and the distant trill of birds. Inside, the three pigs sat together around the breakfast table. Pip had gathered fresh berries from the hedgerows. Barley had poured a pot of tea, fragrant with herbs from their new garden. Brindle arranged pieces of baked apple on small plates, his expression calm but thoughtful. "We can't keep running forever," Brindle said, his voice low. "He'll be back, and each time he comes he grows smarter." Pip nodded, chewing a berry. "So we do something about it." Brindle's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. We prepare. We don't just defend, we plan." Barley shifted, scratching, behind an ear. "You mean a trap?" "Yes," Brindle said firmly. "Not to hurt him. That's not clever. But to stop him. To teach him that these pigs are not easy prey." Pip's ears perked up. "I've got an idea. We could use the garden, build a hidden pit, cover it with leaves and twigs. He wouldn't see it until—" Brindle raised a hoof. "Clever, Pip. But we need more than a hole. He's too sharp. To fall for something simple." Barley frowned. "Then what do we do?" Brindle smiled faintly, tracing a line in the dust with a hoof. "We make it seem like we're careless. He thinks we're weak. We give him a way in, and then we guide him where we want." Pip's eyes lit. "We can use the garden paths, the flowers, the herbs, and the forest will help cover our tracks." Barley nodded slowly. "We can make it look inviting, but all the while, he'll be walking right into our plan." And so the pigs set to work. For the next several days, they labored together. They built a winding path through the garden, planting fragrant herbs to mask their movements. They dug a cleverly hidden pit in the soft earth beneath a thicket of raspberry bushes, covering it with brush and leaves. They stacked logs and stones along likely routes, creating barriers and funnels that would guide the wolf's movements without revealing the trap. Pip worked on the decorations, little tufts of moss, flowers, twigs, making the trap appear natural, almost inviting. Barley strengthened the pit's edges and camouflaged its cover. Brindle checked every corner of the garden, ensuring that nothing could give away the plan. By the end of the week, the trap was complete. The garden seemed untouched, serene, and alive with color. Yet beneath its beauty lay a web of careful preparation. At night, they would sit together by the hearth, reviewing their plan, imagining the wolf's approach. "He'll think the door is unlatched again," Brindle said, tracing the path from the window to the pit. "He'll follow the scent of apples, come straight through the garden." Pip shivered with excitement. "And then he'll fall right in," Barley chuckled, shaking his head. "I can't believe we're doing this. But I like it." Brindle nodded. "We do it together. He comes at us, we stay calm, and we guide him. The forest will do the rest." The night before the wolf's return, the pigs slept lightly, alert to every sound. The rustle of leaves, the faint hoot of an owl, the whisper of wind. The stone house stood strong behind them. The garden spread like a quiet trap waiting to be sprung. Outside, hidden among the trees, the wolf paced. He had been watching for days, studying the hill, noting the changes. He saw the garden in bloom, the house finished and gleaming, the pigs moving with confidence he had not seen before. A low, predatory grin spread across his face. "So, they think they've outsmarted me again," he muttered. "We'll see about that." He slunk forward under the cover of darkness, eyes gleaming with anticipation. The scent of baked apples drifted to him, carrying the promise of reward. Every step brought him closer to the house, closer to the trap, closer to the lesson the pigs had prepared for him. And beneath the moonlit sky, The forest itself seemed to lean forward, watching, waiting, ready to witness the final reckoning. The hill was quiet. The stone walls glowed faintly. The garden seemed serene, but the air thrummed with the promise of confrontation. The wolf crept closer. The trap waited, and the pigs, alert and ready, held their breath for the moment they had long been planning. Night had fallen like a soft velvet curtain over the forest. The stars blinked faintly through drifting clouds, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the scent of pine, apples, and the soft earth of the pig's garden. Inside the stone house, the three brothers sat quietly by the fire. Their plan had been tested and prepared for days. Every stone, every path, every camouflaged pit was in place. They had learned patience, courage, and the value of working together. Brindle glanced at his brothers. "Tonight," he said quietly, "we face him, but remember, fear gives him power. Confidence and patience take it away." Pip nodded, his ears twitching with anticipation. "We'll be ready." Barley pulled his blanket tight. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Brindle smiled faintly. "A long way indeed, and tonight it ends." Outside, the wolf crept through the forest. He had circled the hill all day, studying every detail, and now, under the cover of darkness, he approached the pig's house with deliberate caution. His eyes gleamed yellow in the moonlight. Every step was calculated, every muscle tense. He reached the garden first. The fragrant herbs drifted to him on the night air, tempting him forward. He saw the winding paths, the flowers, the carefully arranged stones. They seemed innocent, serene, the perfect invitation. He smiled thinly. "Fools," he whispered. "They think beauty can hide cunning. We shall see." The wolf followed the path, his nose twitching as he sniffed the scent of apples. He crept closer, careful to avoid the loose branches and tufts of moss, believing himself cleverer than he had been before. But the pigs had anticipated him. Every step led him closer to the pit. The ground beneath the raspberry thicket was soft, and camouflaged leaves and twigs masking the trap. Inside the house, Brindle watched the shadows outside, his ears attuned to every sound. Pip crouched near the back window, and Barley stayed by the garden path, all three alert but silent. The wolf reached the pit. He sniffed and pawed at the earth, testing for weakness. Then, with a swift, confident lunge, he stepped onto the hidden surface. The leaves and twigs gave way. The pit swallowed him whole. He yelped and scrambled, claws scraping the earth, fur bristling, eyes wide with shock. The pit was deep, its sides slippery and steep. For a moment the wolf struggled to climb, but the pigs had ensured there was no easy escape. From above, the pigs watched in silent triumph. Brindle finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Say it's over, Wolf. You underestimated us." The wolf glared upward, his chest heaving, his pride wounded but his spirit stubborn. "You pigs think you've won?" he growled. Pip stepped forward. "We didn't think. We planned. And we worked together. That's why we're here. And you're there." Barley added, "No huffing, no puffing, no tricks this time, just patience and cleverness." The wolf snarled, trying again to claw his way up, but every movement only reminded him of his failure. He shook his head, the moonlight catching the streaks of his singed fur, and slowly sank to sit at the bottom of the pit, breathing heavily. Brindle leaned closer to the edge. "Go home, Wolf. Learn your lesson. You will find no easy prey here again." For a long moment, the wolf glared, up, the tension thick in the night air. Then, with a bitter, defeated snarl, he slunk into the shadows, moving deeper into the forest. His yellow eyes faded, leaving only the faint whisper of movement among the trees. The pigs exhaled, a quiet relief washing over them. Pip laughed softly. "We did it." "Finally," Barley nodded, smiling. "Together, we did it." Brindle looked around at his brothers. "The forest is wide and there are many challenges ahead, but tonight we faced one and prevailed. That is worth remembering." The fire crackled, warm and steady. The stars above blinked like distant candles in the sky. Outside, the garden swayed gently in the breeze, serene and alive. The three pigs stood together at the doorway, gazing out at the forest that had once seemed so dangerous. Now it felt safer, shaped not just by walls of stone, but by the courage, patience, and cleverness of three brothers united. Pip turned to Brindle. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Brindle smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But now we know. Strength alone does not protect. Together we are stronger and cleverer. That is something no wolf can change," Barley added, "and if he does return, we'll be ready." The pigs returned to the warmth of their home, the fire glowing bright, the night calm and comforting. And for the first time in a long while, the forest seemed to echo their peace. The leaves whispered softly, the wind hummed through the trees, and the stars above watched over the hill in gentle silence. The wolf had been defeated, not by force but by wit, unity, and careful planning. And the three little pigs, once separate and vulnerable, now shared a home, a garden, and a bond stronger than stone. In the quiet of the night, the forest settled once more, carrying the promise of safety, courage, and the enduring power of togetherness. And so the three little pigs lived wisely, built boldly, and faced the world united, forever ready for whatever challenges the forest might bring.